Great. Hello, everyone. On behalf of our panelists, I'd like to welcome you to the panel called Game Changers. Houston is shaping the future with innovations in health tech. My name is Jim Pavlik, and I'm a partner with Baird Capital. We're a venture capital firm that focuses on investments in emerging healthcare and technology businesses, and I'll be serving as the moderator for the panel's discussion today. It's a real pleasure to host such an esteemed group of panelists from Houston's healthcare ecosystem. And I think we have a really nice combination of leaders from both healthcare provider organizations in the community, as well as entrepreneurs and leaders from emerging health technology vendors in the market as well, which I think will give the audience a really nice, helpful mix of perspectives from different aspects of the industry. The topic of health tech innovation is a really timely and critical one right now, particularly as the COVID pandemic continues on and has really placed enormous strain on the healthcare system to not only adapt very quickly to new ways of delivering care, but also effectively engaging with patients in this new environment. And that in turn has been a really significant catalyst in accelerating innovation and digital transformation initiatives in the industry. So before we dive in, we'll have a host of questions for the panel, but I'd first like to have each of the panelists go ahead and introduce themselves and share a little bit of background on their roles and their organizations as well. So maybe Alex, if you don't mind kicking us off, we'll start with you and allow everyone to introduce themselves.
Hey everyone, my name is Alex Bakke. I'm a physician, born, raised, and educated here in Houston, Texas. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Valhalla Healthcare, where we have an intelligent patient intake system that automates a lot of the clinical notes for doctors.
Terrific. Emma, would you introduce yourself as well?
Hi, my name is Emma Faust, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Medical Informatics Corp. And we help deliver virtual care solutions such as remote patient monitoring, virtual command centers, and predictive analytics to hospitals around the country. So thanks.
That's great. Let's move over to Juliet.
Hi, everyone. I started my career as a family physician, but after about 4 years, found my passion in the business of medicine and have not looked back. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm on my 9th company, which is Next Level Urgent Care. I'm the founder and CEO. I also helped to run a company that is a hospice provider in Houston called Vantage Hospice. And additionally, during my career, I've really been very involved in health tech, using tech to make create efficiencies in workflow, in cost efficiencies, and in communications. So that's me.
Excellent. And then Roberta.
Hi, I'm Roberta Schwartz. I'm the Executive Vice President and Chief Innovation Officer at Houston Methodist Hospital. I've been here going on 20 years now. So I really understand the provider community. Before then, came from similar roles in New York. So it's a pleasure to be here with everybody.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. So let's go ahead and dive into the Q&A. And again, looking forward to the different perspectives from the panel. Let's start first with the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, a predominant topic these days. It wouldn't surprise me if this was the first question on most of the panels at the conference, but particularly relevant for this one in terms of the healthcare industry and innovation in healthcare. And I'd like to hear really from all the panelists, just in terms of how the pandemic has not only impacted your organization, but maybe more specifically, how it's impacted your innovation priorities, and then also as you've adapted to the new environment, how technology has allowed your business to adapt to dealing with the pandemic. So if we could start, I'll start maybe with Roberta. If you could kick us off with a few thoughts, and we'll move across the panel and get some additional comments as well.
Well, I think it would be obvious to say that every aspect of a provider community has been impacted by COVID. So as we have basically surged and closed and surged and moved to basically take care of the COVID population, a lot of things that were kind of our normal way of operating have almost gone on hold. And what you've found is a community of people that, not unlike other businesses, have really had to adapt to a new patient population, a new set of concerns that we never dealt with in the past. I can tell you that the only time I heard the word PPE was during some disaster, and when we were standing outside testing our showers for the accrediting bodies. It was really the only time we were having mass discussions about PPE. Now it's a daily vocabulary word. The same thing on the vaccination process. Never did I think I would see our institution completely turn on its heels, try to find 400 people, to put them out in the field to get mass vaccination done of the population. Those kind of things are becoming our norm. So we've really had to adjust in the last year. For a lot of people and a lot of companies that were working with us, that meant putting a lot of things that were normal on hold while we kind of had to pivot and put all of our energy just to kind of dealing with this disaster. The only difference between this and every other disaster we've ever had in the past is every other disaster lasted a few weeks, a month, and this one's now we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary.
Very helpful. Very helpful. Maybe Juliet, also from a provider perspective, it'd be helpful to get your thoughts on changes you've seen over the last year.
Well, I can start by saying what she said, but in addition, I think all of us that were providers, if we weren't interested in the digital world, being in the virtual world, and providing care for people off-site. We basically had to decide that we did care about that really fast. And I know that obviously, the world has turned to telehealth in a way that we would have never done without the pandemic. And that's kind of the obvious one. In our organization, besides the testing and the vaccinations, which was, something that was completely, new and required a lot of discussion, a lot of innovation around systems and processes. The other thing that we took on was we wanted to be part of finding solutions. So we got involved with clinical research, which was something that was never even on my roadmap. I had no interest in being a research facility until all of a sudden I thought my own daily life might be affected. And so, we have done a lot of things that I think that we look now and say we never would have been involved in that. And I think, top on the list obviously is telehealth, but beyond that, it's been a wild ride for us over in the urgent care world.
That's great. And then Alex and Emma, from an entrepreneur's perspective, in particular, running tech companies in this environment, how much has it been created challenges to gain attention, from your buyer universe, just given the other priorities that have come up, or have you found it to be a catalyst as well for different digital transformation initiatives? Curious what your experience has been during the pandemic, and any adaptations you've had to make in your model and interacting with your buyers.
Do you want to go first, Alex, or you want me to go?
You can go, Emma.
I'll say for our perspective, it's been a bit of a mixed bag, and that really varies. We sell to hospitals, and so depending on how the hospitals themselves have had to face COVID and how that's affected their budgets, their timelines for doing things, has really been different across the board. Some hospitals, one of the first things we did at the beginning of the pandemic was we reached out to all of our customers, knowing that if clinical distancing was a factor, leveraging the ability to remotely round and monitor patients would be a factor for our clients. And so when we even partnered with Intel to help actually get additional resources to our clients as well through a Scale to Serve program that we've done with them over the past year and is continuing to run into this year as well. And we found that in those cases, there's just been a surge of utilization, real interest in how do you actually use remote monitoring to improve care, not just for COVID, but going forward in the future, and leveraging analytics to help with scale issues. Because again, some organizations have faced staffing issues. Even the older staff can't necessarily be on the front lines, either due to fatigue issues or exposure to COVID before the vaccine was available. And so that's what we've seen in other hospitals that maybe that are in smaller organizations. They've really been struggling on the front lines just to deliver basic care, get access to PPP. Taking on new IT projects is not something they can do, even if they want to. So I think that is why we've seen sort of mixed distribution. But I do think it has fundamentally forced organizations to look at care delivery and the care delivery models and challenge the underlying assumptions that had been pre-COVID. So I think we'll continue to see those trends echo out into 2021 and beyond.
That's great. Alex, any additional comments from your perspective?
Yeah, so we're on the other side. We actually sell more into outpatient. And for us, COVID really caused a lot of kind of pivoting in real time, because in March, when COVID was really starting to ramp up and we saw closures in the physical clinics, we had a physical component of our technology in which we distribute our technology as a web application, but it can be used on tablets that we usually provided to some of the clinics we were working with. And then when a lot of the response was for closures of those clinics, and of course less touching and passing around to reduce transmission, of course, the tablets kind of fell out of popularity, let's just say, and really had to force us to rethink the usage of our technology as an end-to-end, web application. So what we did very quickly was we spun up our technology, packaged our web application into something called an API, an application programming interface, which is essentially being able to embed our technology within either applications or portals within another existing application. And what that allowed us to do was to respond in real time and provide our technology within telehealth services, so that the value we were providing in the form of being able to do that kind of physician level intake in advance in the waiting room with the patient, a lot of that could be done in the virtual waiting room in a telehealth offering. And with that, we were able to very quickly kind of grow our subscriptions mostly in telehealth now. And as a result, kind of accelerated our traction and growth. I think one other comment I wanted to put that's not so much related to us is, and really kind of second a lot of what Emma was mentioning when it comes to rethinking care delivery, and how the status quo pre-COVID showed us a lot of vulnerabilities in the health systems and hospitals that, of course, generate a lot of their revenue from, elective surgeries or surgeries. And with COVID, and even now where we're struggling and we see a lot of health systems having to kind of pull back on those elective surgeries, they're really getting hit in their bottom line. And I think it's forcing a lot of health systems to take a hard look at, diversifying potentially their revenue generation, away from those specialized, services like surgeries, and more to, of course, things like outpatient care, managing, diabetes, managing other chronic conditions, which, can, of course, there are a lot of incentives with some of the new billing guidelines. So I think that's probably one, probably for the better, whether it be a hard lesson that care delivery and optimization with new technologies are starting to get taken a little bit more seriously than before COVID.
That's great. That's great. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk a bit about, as you look to adapt your business and bring innovation into your organization. And this will be geared really more initially towards Juliet and Roberta from a health system perspective. But curious how, as you think about driving innovation within your organizations, how you really source that. To what extent are there certain priorities that you feel the need and have to rely on in-house resources and really focus on owning those versus really leveraging external innovation and other outside technology vendors to help you in that journey. Would love to hear, maybe starting with Roberta, your thoughts on that in terms of kind of that buy, build, partner decision as you think about your innovation initiatives.
So knowing Juliet, I have a feeling you're going to get similar answers in slightly different shades, because I think both of us work in very similar ways. But I think that I appreciate so much that we have Alex on the call and Emma on the call, as they are great examples of people that you can have partnerships with. And I can speak with Emma very deeply, as she is one of our biggest partners with MIC Sickbay. I think to think that we as providers can innovate as quickly as innovative companies, you'd be kidding yourself. And to think that a big company like Epic or Cerner is going to innovate at the same rate is crazy. And so I do not believe that most of us are really going to count on the fact that it's going to be our EMR vendor or it's going to be us doing it. I think those days have that ship has sailed. And so it's up to us to basically forge these partnerships with innovative companies and grow with them. And we have been able to do that with a set of foundational innovators that we've put in our toolkit. That we have been able to grow with, whether it's MIC Sickbay doing, predictive analytics or data analysis, or just really being able to see our alarms, or CareSense, really doing that clinical care pathways type of program and really expanding that for COVID activities. I was so appreciative that when COVID came around, all we had to do was hold up the toolkit and be like, hey, just pivot this way. And if you just turn 1 degree, we have everything we need. And there was literally one company we added on in the entire COVID to be able to take care of all of our needs, because we had everything in place. And that was astounding. Now, when it comes to filling our pipeline, I was just saying to our team this week, hey, I don't like the way our pipeline looks, because we've been relying on all of our foundational partners. And I'm sure there's a pipeline out there, because all of us are not going to meetings in the same way as we did a year ago. We would constantly be sourcing. At a meeting, I sit with Julia, right? We would be sourcing 10, 12, 14 companies, listening to them, hearing it. What are you doing? What are they doing? And we just can't do that in the same way right now. So I think that you'll find in 2020, end of 2021, beginning of 2022, I think people will continue to refill their pipelines for kind of new directions that they can go, rather than just repurposing what we had for COVID.
Very, very helpful. Very helpful. Juliet, anything to add there? Or any additional comments from your perspective?
Well, I occasionally do try to build stuff myself when I can't find it anywhere. But Roberta's right. I mean, for the most part, it is really hard to do that. And we are so lucky. We are so fortunate in Houston, because we have this incredible ecosystem that has been developing over the years. I've watched it kind of all of a sudden become this place where if I identify a problem that I want to solve, I can pick up the phone and somehow get connected 6 degrees of separation to somebody who's working on that problem. So it is, it's really exciting to be in this kind of environment. This is, it's a lot of fun.
That's great. Any, maybe from the entrepreneur's perspective, Alex, maybe you could kick us off here, but was curious, we'll obviously have a lot of other startups and entrepreneurs participating in the conference here. So I'm sure, getting your perspective on any tips or guidance as you try to break through and, get the attention of buyers, particularly in this environment, but let's even say, outside of the pandemic environment, but just knowing, breaking through, getting the attention and accelerating sales cycles, in the space has always been, a challenge for younger companies. So curious if you had any thoughts and tips for others that are out there.
Yeah, for sure. Healthcare is notorious for its very glacial type of sales cycles, and there are a lot of reasons for that compared to other industries. But there are a few things that you can do, right? Is making sure that you have a good product and you're solving an actual problem that is occurring. And in particular for us, we're big believers from solving problems through the provider's lens, because it's too easy to throw around fancy technology, AI, machine learning, automation, big data, but it doesn't mean anything unless it has a very specific use case, but then that it fits well within clinical workflow. And that is something that is very commonly ignored, is the delicate nature of whether it be a physician or other healthcare providers and their workflow, because they have so much going on. They really don't have time to learn new things. They already have to chart and everything. They don't need another fancy widget that's going to take away from doing their job, which is of taking care of patients. So making sure that you really have provider input for your particular field with a healthcare technology to be able to challenge you on that workflow component of the realities of delivering healthcare. And then the last thing I would add is just building relationships. I know it sounds almost cliche, but I believe that healthcare is more relationship driven. My belief and theory is that because of a very high degree of empathy that healthcare providers have for taking care of patients, it really kind of drives that further than say just numbers and like finance. So I think making sure that you aren't just trying to push a hard sale, but rather that you're actually looking to bring value and build a relationship, a growing relationship, as Roberto was mentioning, with that health organization, because it is going to be a long-term relationship. It's going to be a bilateral investment. And that's, I think, what leads to, the best of both worlds for everyone.
Excellent points. Excellent points there. Emma, anything you'd like to add on that point?
I just second Alex on the relationship component, especially this past year where you had to shift from doing in-person meetings and meeting people. You could just walk down the hallway and meet people when you were visiting a site, or you would be like, hey, I need to pull in somebody, and they'd be able to pull in. That's not been possible this year. So a lot of it's about one-on-one conversations you have with people. So those relationships do become really important. But I think just in terms of tactics too, from any entrepreneur out there looking to work in the healthcare space, the thing you really have to sort of think about now is a lot of people are, they're on so many video conferences per day. They're overwhelmed with invites for things, right? You really have to think about every time you engage with somebody, it has to be a high value engagement. It has to be meaningful. It has to be worth both of your time, right? So I would just stress, when you think about whatever you're doing to get your message out there or build those relationships, think about leveraging your time and your client's time or potential client's time effectively, right? That becomes really important these days. And I think even going forward, it's going to be important. I don't think that falls off or anything like that. Yeah, so that's what I just say for operating right now in sort of this odd space where traditionally it's been a hard sell to get through the long sales process, but maintaining that engagement and attention and building those relationships is even more challenging in this environment.
That's great. Let's dive a little bit deeper. Juliet made a comment about the Houston ecosystem, and I think it's an important one to touch on here today. And clearly, all of your organizations have benefited by being part of leading hub for healthcare innovation in particular. Would love to get any perspectives on either cases in growing your own businesses or any stories. And I know some of you even proactively selected Houston to build your business. So both a little bit on the benefits that you've seen to date, but then also just as a community as a whole, ways that Houston can continue to leverage that ecosystem of both talent and innovation. And any volunteers to kick that off? Or great, Emma.
I'll jump in with that. I'm the one that moved here. I know that. Not born and raised in Texas, but it was interesting. We had started the company back in Virginia, and we were looking at where to relocate and build this business. And we were looking at Boston, we were looking at the West Coast, we were looking at Atlanta, and we had a chance to actually get invited down here by one of the healthcare organizations, and we didn't even know the Texas Medical Center existed. and came down here and saw all these hospitals. And at that time, there was a little bit of innovation going on, but not so much in the headlines. And we looked around and we said, if you're gonna really build a robust healthcare company, why not be in an environment where you have all these different healthcare delivery models, different customers? I mean, that's really what you need early on. You need to be able to bounce ideas off of different business models. Some of the hospitals here are very regionally focused. Some of them are globally focused. Some of them are specialty, and so you get a chance to really be very close and build those relationships across a wide variety of providers in a way that really tests and make your product robust, I believe. So from that perspective, Houston is just an amazing space to grow a healthcare business. And then the second thing I would just say is it has been amazing to build a business here with the talent that you have access to. Most people don't think of talent when they think of, if you're on the coast in Texas, but there's a lot of history of strong tech companies here, lots of large corporations that have deep resources, and sometimes they're looking to switch out of oil and gas or finance, and they want to come over and do something to save lives, or they're more mission driven. And healthcare is that space. And so we've been able to grow our company in a way that's been surprisingly capital efficient, given, when we talk to investors and they look at building companies on, for instance, the West Coast around the Bay Area. It has been really helpful. And I think that's needed in healthcare, where you have the long sales cycles, and it does take a while to build up that sort of background knowledge of what you need to operate and scale within the healthcare industry. So
that's great. And then Roberta and Juliet, I know you obviously commented a little bit earlier about the benefit of having technology companies like those that are represented here on the panel, but having them in the local community, and just the ease of engaging. Maybe you could comment on how that's maybe changed in the last 5 or 10 years, and just the promise that you see, where it's heading as well.
I'll jump in on that. When I got down here, I came by way of Chicago, and I was coming from medical school. And when I saw the Texas Medical Center, I said, well, if I can't learn how to be a doctor here, I can't learn how to be a doctor. And I still feel like that in a different way. Now, the medical center actually sort of represents something different to me. I'm out in the private world, in the periphery, but the fact that the medical center exists allows a lot of innovators to be here. And so we all benefit from that. Everyone in the ecosystem benefits from that. The other thing that you hear a lot about Houston is that other doctors and people that I talk to that have started their own medical businesses in other places refer to Houston as the Wild West of medical care, because we are in a city or a state that is a no CON. So there's if you have an idea and you want to put up a medical business, you can pretty easily. And there are just a lot of entrepreneurial people in Houston. So it's sort of, everything sort of feeds on each other. We've got a lot of innovative doctors and entrepreneurial doctors. We have a lot of interesting medical related businesses that are sort of popping up everywhere. And then you've got this amazing medical center with all of these huge institutions, and of course TMCX, which has brought a lot of innovation to the environment. So those are my comments about that.
Absolutely. Roberta or Alex, any other comments?
Yeah, I'll add on that there is an ease to being able to see people around in the community and working with them. The fact that MS data scientists can drop in on our doctors is a big deal. The fact that we can sit down, not just on Zoom, not have to fly people in, to have a conversation with them is big. And I think that it really has enabled some of the development, both probably on their side and certainly on ours, to move much more quickly and for us to adapt. It also is a really amazing how much more smoothly and nicely contract negotiations and other types of things go when, you actually are in the community together. It's not some stranger that, you've seen once or twice. They've come down here with two salespeople, and, I don't have to care. But I do, you do care a little bit more about those people that you're seeing. So it does have an easiness to being in the community. It is also amazing to watch the innovative community grow. And when that community itself grows, they feed off of each other. And we benefit from that. I can tell you, we are, what is that? There's some term like competitive but friendly as Texas Medical Center, which is that, all of us need to cut the cost of care, right? All of us need to do a better job in quality. So that is irregardless of the fact that we may compete on, reputation and business and doctors and, types of services and where we're locating our facilities, and kind of how we're doing things. But the fact that these companies are helping us with those basic facts, I think there was a statement that one of our board members made, who is in the airline industry, which is you never compete on quality. Like, quality is a basic that everyone needs to do better, and we all just help each other. And that's kind of, you'd be amazed to see all of us sitting on the phone talking about sharing patients with each other on COVID. When you're full, I'm full, because we're just surviving together. So when companies help one of us on quality, when Julia calls me and says, hey, I want you to take a look at this because I really think it's going to help you, I immediately, that call is answered within a second. And if that entrepreneur doesn't call me, I'm calling them. So I think that is something you'll find, that when you have this robust healthcare community, we're sharing. And I don't know, Julia, you might or might not just agree, but that's kind of
I do.
Excellent. Well, great commentary there. Very, very helpful. So I believe we have about 15 minutes left. So I definitely want to use a little bit of time here to dig into a few specific areas of innovation and get your thoughts on trends there and what you're seeing in your companies. The first one, again, it doesn't apply just to healthcare, but hot topic really in any industry, but artificial intelligence and machine learning. Clearly, an element of hype in the area, but there also clearly are real world applications and use cases that are live right now and creating value. So we'd love to hear from the panel a little bit in terms of how, where you're seeing machine learning and AI start to make their way into healthcare and the efficiencies and value that you're seeing to date. And then even some commentary on what you're seeing in the future, where you see opportunities for the technology to move the needle. Maybe Alex, I'll start with you. And I know, there are applications here really across all of your companies, so others can chime in as well.
Yeah, of course, AI machine learning is one of the big buzzwords that's thrown around pretty often. And I really want to go back to what I was mentioning about the clinical workflow, because it's really about the use case and the application of AI machine learning. Not that you just do it for the sake of doing it, but what value does it bring? And the problem in particular in AI machine learning is that you tend to need a lot of data or resources and then time in order to really kind of get to that threshold of where you see value. So that's one other problem is, not being able to provide value in the form of right now can be a pretty big inhibitor, I think, to, utilizing and moving your technology. But once again, it's the application and utility of that AI technology, whether it be, ambient voice and doing the charting the note, but not taking into consideration, say, the clinical workflow, having to do verbal commands or any other things that do disrupt the clinical workflow, or understanding that the physician or the provider still has to spend time, a limited amount of time on still doing a lot of that history. Maybe that's not going to be providing as much value than if you're using that same type of NLP in a different way. So that's the main takeaway, is just really be able to provide value today, not promising, down the road, and making it very clear that it's fitting into the current care delivery model, especially when you're dealing with providers, which is who we normally work with.
Great, great. Emma, clearly a lot of data science within your technology and business. Maybe you could comment here as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of media hype around AI, and I think a lot of people take it and say, "Hey, this is going to take over and tell doctors what to do." But that is not even close to where we are, right? A lot of AI, for intents purposes, you can think of as um, basically event recognition, basically teaching a computer to recognize patterns in the data. And to Alex's point, you need lots of that data. You need to label that data. It's not just about having the data, but those labels become really important, and then training the models and then validating to make sure that you're not introducing anything that from either an ethical or even a identification standpoint creates bias that would create downstream problems, right? So those are sort of the considerations you need to take in when doing AI in healthcare. From our perspective, we've been in this space for a long time. We've helped develop predictive analytics, leveraging data sets because we specialize in helping collect and label that data. And so in this next year, what we really start to see is a lot of things coming out around documentation automation, taking away some of the burden of the care team, making sure that revenue capture, there's revenue capture opportunities to help with billing and things like that. And also just, there's a lot of places in the workflow today where things get documented, but they don't actually get used for clinical diagnosis or treatment. So then also just bridging that gap to help provide that documentation more at the fingertips of the providers so providers can be more proactive in that care delivery as well. So I really see it as a sort of continuum of we'll start to see AI integrated into the workflows, and it's going to be almost invisible, I think, to the end users in many ways. You're just going to start to see the applications and of AI become sort of ingrained in the way we're augmenting work that's already being done. So
Great.
I'm excited about it.
Great. Roberta or Juliet, in your organizations, are you starting to see applications and impact today?
Yeah, most definitely. For us, where I get scared when someone says AI. I'm immediately like, oh no, because there's just a million people coming to us with AI solutions. But as Emma mentioned, she's absolutely right. There are things that it's going to be little changes, not some huge thing where all of a sudden everything's done by a computer. But we see real potential for cost removal from the system with thoughtful AI. Certainly things that are very that I think are more amenable to things like use of AI are even in my world, the reading of X-rays. Even if AI just said this one's normal, that's a huge help because it's just tons of money that we're spending on getting someone to say yep, normal. And so if a computer can do that, that's really helpful. I see the same thing in Path. I think there's some pathology applications that are really amazing and pretty helpful there. I don't think anything's going to be a replacement for anything, but maybe just a tweak that could eliminate some costs. I also really see AI as being incredibly helpful with the billing, with the revenue cycle. There's just so much there that is such a waste of time that people do every day, and computers could do so much of a better job. We just need to put the rules in place, and so that's where I see AI making a really big difference in the coming years. And I do get worried when anyone comes and says, "Oh, you're never gonna have to do another thing. It's just gonna I'll do it for you." And I don't see that quite yet.
Excellent. Great perspectives there. Let's shift gears. I know we've got a few more minutes here to one other area. I've heard, through the panel here a couple of times, obviously reducing cost reduction and cost management throughout the system. And one of the big drivers of that is really enabling alternate sites of care and site of care optimization, whether through telehealth, more recently through urgent care, through retail clinics, et cetera. And I think a lot of being able to manage that and drive that is really technology enablement. So would love to hear a couple of thoughts specifically on just sort of site of care optimization and what you're seeing within your local community and ecosystem. I know, Alex, I know there's a use case or case study within your product set that I think applies here. Maybe you could kick us off, and obviously Juliet's business plays directly in this area as well.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the kind of, as we're growing and expanding, kind of our scope here is, how can we better utilize some of the data that we're collecting directly from the patients, what we call in clinical medicine, the subjective data, and providing new information that otherwise would not have been collected, either because physicians or providers forgot, they don't have time, and how we can actually provide those data feeds to providers, care navigators, and taking care of chronic care patients. And in particular, we're really excited about an opportunity where we're working with payers and providers, in particular with chronic kidney disease, and be able to take and directly kind of dynamically adapt a lot of that clinical intake to the patient for this type of stage in their kidney disease, which is more relevant to them, looking out for signs and symptoms of uremia, something called metabolic acidosis, and other features that are tied to kidney disease. Because the goal is, if we can provide some of that data, visualize it, and potentially provide recommendations or notifications in real time that's integrated within the clinical workflow, is that we can get these patients care before they show up in the emergency room needing dialysis, because that's, one, more expensive, and two, that's just not the best experience for a patient, and it's not the best for better outcomes. And what that means is taking that data and making the decision for the providers to make the decision, hey, this patient can actually benefit then from home dialysis instead of going to the ED. And that's cheaper, and that's better for the patient, better for outcomes, better experience for the patient. And we're really excited to be able to kind of flesh out that use case more, because that's why we do what we do, is because we want to help as many patients as we can by being able to see data and utilizing data in a better way, in a more efficient way for healthcare providers.
Great. Juliet, any comments related to urgent care specifically, or what, how you're driving, this within your business?
Well, maybe not urgent care specifically, but I think one of the things that's most interesting about healthcare in general, and it's why I like to wake up in the morning and work on it, is that it's pretty messed up, and we have a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges in the future. I think that the pandemic has introduced everybody to this digital world, the virtualization, but I think that there are a lot of problems with getting care only that way. So you can't really do it only that way, and there has to be a lot of work on how consumers are going to use healthcare, because they can't only use it from their couch, and they can't only use it in the hospital. And it is very confusing now, because how do we get the people to the right site of service? And I think even, in my industry, we have people who come into the urgent care with a hangnail, and we have people who come into the urgent care with 3 broken bones. The hangnail didn't have to come to the urgent care. And we could have probably taken care of that in a virtual visit, but the patient makes the decision, and we're not in the patient's head. And so this is going to be the challenge of medicine going forward, is how do we train the public to use the right site of service at the right time? And I think all of us will probably be working on that for our lifetimes.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and a good segue maybe for our last comment here, but wanted to hit on also the trend that you just mentioned, Juliet, around consumerization of healthcare, and consumers just becoming much more active in managing their care, and increasingly through mobile and digital channels. And Roberta, I'd love to get your thoughts on how you're implementing different technologies for this purpose to better engage with consumers, and just the opportunity to continue to improve there.
So if you divide the world of telemedicine, it's actually been fascinating. I mean, if there's one winner of this pandemic, it's definitely telemedicine. The adoption by the consumer, the adoption by the physicians, and the other providers has been astounding. So we went, to give you an idea of how large this went, we went from less than 5% of our visits to, at one point when we were really closed down, 80% of our visits via telemedicine and settling in about 30-35%. So I mean, it has shifted. What I thought would take 5 years took like 5 minutes. So that's kind of a change. Now that's the direct to consumer, and that is a big piece of the world. That's not the only place that really telemedicine is going to play. And this is where I really do think you'll see this kind of AI supported telemedicine, which is all of the hospital to hospital services and consultant to physician services are really ripe. If you think about it, why should they leave Juliet's urgent care if she can dial into one of my doctors to get some support and not have to send them over to our emergency room, right? We start driving this down. So, I mean, for us, telestroke, teleneurology, teleinfectious disease we have up, tele-ICU we have up. We are basically building out telepsychiatry. We couldn't survive without telepsychiatry. I have to tell you, oh my goodness, we closed down. So as you really look at this world of really having specialty hubs like a Houston Methodist, like a specialty hubs, servicing large swaths of various communities where they're not going to have all of these people, and really putting that technology in at the far ends to allow us to beam in is really astounding. And we're doing it with all of our community hospitals right now. But if you think about it, really our future in this land is these specialty hubs being able to aid lots of other people who are out there. Direct to consumer is a big piece. The other thing I think you'll see on direct to consumers is more and more tools that will hook onto your iPhone, like a TytoCare, like another kind of technology, or a Butterfly that's going to enable you to do a very sophisticated set of exams that the physicians need without coming to the physicians. And these are getting cheaper and better to hook on and allow for the specialists, again, what they had to see you and feel you before. Now a lot of those things can be done via these add-ons, and I think that's going to be a big growth area in the next couple of years.
That's great. Very helpful, and I think a good way to wrap up our discussion. We are at the end of our allotted time, but I'd like to thank all of our panelists for sharing their comments and insights here. Extremely helpful, and we hope everyone in the audience enjoyed the discussion.